Hello, I'm Chris Burns, and welcome to this special edition of the network here at the European Parliament in Strasbourg. We connect into a matrix of newsmakers to get to the heart of an issue. And watch out, they've got to answer in 25 seconds or less, or else. Let's take a look at that issue right now. The showdown over the EU's 7-year budget plan, finally approved by the European Parliament, had dragged on for months. Clashing national and sectoral interests turned the negotiations into what the Budget Commissioner called extreme sports. This while jobless youth and workers hit by plant shutdowns demonstrated against cash-strapped governments imposing austerity. As unemployment tops 12%, double that among youth, the European Parliament, Commission and national leaders reached agreement. They'll front-load billions to fight youth unemployment and boost the smaller businesses that create most of Europe's jobs. The nearly €1 trillion spending plan faces overall spending reductions. Critics are blasting the budget's spending increases for EU bureaucracy and for keeping agricultural supports at nearly 40% of the budget. Is the spending plan really going to make a difference for the victims of a crisis that won't go away? Now, wired into this edition of the network is here at the European Parliament in Strasbourg, Richard Ashworth, who's the EU budget rapporteur for the European Conservatives and Reformists group in the Parliament. Also in Strasbourg here, Ivailo Kalfin, who's also on the Parliament's Budget Committee. He's the rapporteur for the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats. And in Helsinki, Juuso Koskinen, head of operations at Startup Sauna, which connects promising startups from Northern Europe with other entrepreneurs, investors, and media from around the world. A question to all three of you, starting with Richard. EU Commission President José Manuel Barroso calls this budget a good deal for Europe. Do you agree?
I'm happy about the size of the budget. We welcome that, the reduction, because that is a reflection on the efforts being made by the governments in the member states. So that's correct. I'm not happy that we have not gone anywhere near far enough to reform the priorities of the budget. The real key issues are jobs and growth. We haven't done enough.
Ivailo, how could Barroso say that it's a good deal when he himself, his commission, had asked for much more money, as well as you? How do you see this? Is this a good deal?
The budget is very much reduced, and this is not good news for the European citizens. At the same time, you have a reshuffle of the political priorities in the budget and much more transparency and new instruments, including the possibility to review the budget in the middle of the period in order to adapt it to the conditions. So that's the good side of it.
Juuso, speaking in terms of startups, but also as a common European, how do you see this? Is this a good deal or not?
Well, obviously, it always could be a lot more, but I'm seeing a good trend towards helping out startups and new companies in the whole EU region.
Okay, all right. Do you think these cuts are too deep or too little? This is a €960 billion budget for over 7 years. It's called the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, or MFF. It's the first time we're cutting this. If you're looking at it that way, Richard, do you think this is really an accomplishment then?
Well, yes, it is, because it's a 908 billion euros of expenditure, and that's what matters. It's not actually the size of the budget, it's what you do with it. And where I'm critical is the priorities we have do not reflect the problems of the people of Europe are facing right now. We desperately need jobs, we need growth, and it's not doing enough to help that.
Okay, let me spin this a little bit differently also for Ivailo, the socialist. The original EU budget proposed an increase, but how could you have argued for that when you got national budgets that are being slashed right now because of austerity?
This is a 7 years budget, first. There is no national budget which is slashed for the next 7 years. Second, the European budget is doing exactly what national budgets cannot do. This is an investment budget. 94% of the European budget goes back to the member states. So this is practically a budget which is not taken away. This is creating a leverage and more funds to the national investments.
Okay, now on the other hand, the Budget Committee Chairman Alain Lamassoure says MEPs won't let the Parliament and European Commission to be condemned to austerity for the next 7 years. Do you agree to something like that, Juuso?
Obviously, as an entrepreneurial background, I believe always we should be always flexible. And yes, as Richard said, I truly believe that we have to do the most of what we have at the moment.
Okay, and let me ask a certain aspect of this. This is budget front load spending on youth unemployment and research. But is it really enough, Richard?
It probably isn't, but we've actually got to prove, firstly, that there is the capacity to absorb that kind of money. We are talking here 6 billion euros. And on top of that, if it is a good investment, why just make it 2 years? Let's carry on, because we desperately need to create jobs for young people right now. And actually, if you're going to create jobs for young people, you've got to have businesses for them to go into. And that's where we've got to help small businesses especially. They're crying out for help, and we're not doing enough.
Okay, well, but Ivailo, you are among the socialists who would have liked to spend more, and you're hearing this from Richard, who's been wanting to cut the budget. What does that sound like to you?
I think once agreeing on the ceilings of the budget, the front-loading for the major political priorities was crucial for the socialist group. And this is the spending for youth employment, the spending for research and development exactly for the competitiveness, another 150 million for the Erasmus program and the youth exchange, and another 50 million front-loaded for the small and medium-sized enterprises. Again, with a budget which is not enough at all, at least what we can do is to anticipate some payments in order not to have huge drops in the expenditures next year.
Okay, but Juuso, what about this funding? I mean, we're talking about an EU of 500 million people. Do you think that money is enough, really, for startups like yours?
Obviously, more could be more. Startups really and entrepreneurs all around Europe will need financial support to get their businesses growing, and that will not be just by only workforce, and that will require some huge fundings and investments in all startups to make them grow better.
Richard, what about the Common Agricultural Policy? It takes up nearly 40% of the budget. Isn't that soaking up cash that could be better spent on R&D, infrastructure, job creation?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a major missed opportunity by the European Union. If we're going to prove the relevance and purpose of the European Union, we've got to be helping people address the problems which they have. And that's about jobs and growth, and we're just not doing enough.
Okay. Ivailo, are we beating up on the farmers there too much?
If you look at the trend, the money for farmers decreased. I mean, the proportion of this money decreased. And if we take it in the last 20 years, it has decreased by 2. So the money goes there with a decreasing pace, and then the money for agriculture is very much spread, including for greening, for innovation, for creating jobs, for helping young farmers. If these funds are stopped, we shall have a huge crisis in the agricultural sector.
So do you think that's fair? 39% and change of the budget is going to farming. Does that mean less money for you?
Well, I suppose the truth is at the moment is that new technology companies are producing and creating more jobs. So in that sense, of course, a bigger slice could be towards small and medium-sized enterprises.
Okay. Final question. This EU budget is only about 1% of the EU's total GDP. Some argue that more funding should be shifted to the EU level to make EU policies more effective. Richard, what do you think?
Well, you can say it's just 1%, but it's actually €1 trillion, and that's a lot of money in anybody's language.
Over 7 years, though.
Yes, I know. It's
and
over
500 million people.
And here is the problem. Why over 7 years? We've got a 5-year term for the Parliament. Why don't you have a 5-year term for the budget? It would make it much more relevant. It would give it a democratic accountability.
Okay, Ivailo, what do you think? More money for the EU?
Absolutely. If we want to devise European policies that are more efficient, that are creating more value than spending at national level, we need to increase that. With 1% budget, which is 45 times less than the national budgets, we cannot achieve what we wish.
Okay, so some people say that in order to do that, we should actually have an EU VAT. What do you think about that as a small business?
I don't think EU may be the best way to support them, but on national level would be actually better for them, as we need very flexible and agile methods to support and fund small and medium-sized companies.
Thanks, Juuso. I think flexibility is the action word for the budget as well. That's all the time we've got for now. I'd like to thank our guests, Richard Ashworth, Ivailo Kalfin, and Juuso Koskinen. I'm Chris Burns, and until next time, thanks for connecting with The Network.